So every single week, I see yet another post on LinkedIn talking about how cold calling is dead. Ever since they brought out the AI screening tool that Apple brought out, that's been officially the catalyst that's finally put the nail in the coffin of cold calling. And it's funny because they said the exact same thing when Claude first came out. This is the death of the SDR, or this is the death of AEs across the planet. And they said the same thing again when ChatGPT first ever came out. They said this is going to completely revolutionize it. AI personalized email campaigns are going to completely take over from now on. It's the same argument I constantly see with Bitcoin, right? People constantly claiming that Bitcoin's dead. It'll crash a little bit, and suddenly a few months later, it rises straight back up. And I feel like it's kind of the same thing with cold calling. So I thought in this podcast, I was just talk through some of the things I've seen online that, are just a load of rubbish, to be honest, in terms of the cold calling space at the moment, and kind of just go through why I think, how a lot of these LinkedIn gurus that you see online don't actually believe cold calling's dead. They've just tried it and are not very good at it. Therefore, they have now declared to their entire audiences that it's dead. And instead, the only way to generate customers from now on is, surprise, surprise, the one acquisition channel that they still seem to operate in. And look, I'm not going to spend this podcast telling you about how, every other form of media is dead and you need to just do cold calling from now on. Instead, I just want to talk through my experience with how we run campaigns over at Everest, and just kind of talk about a different approach in doing these campaigns. It's probably going to give you way better results. So I'll just start off by talking about a recent client that came to us. Through actually trying another outbound partner specifically for cold calling, and it just didn't work. And they could have very easily turned around and after 6 months, it's how long they ran the campaign for, declared that just cold calling hasn't worked, because technically they have tried it. They've ran a campaign, they've done it for 6 months, and they didn't get. I don't think they got any meetings. They might have got 1 or 2 meetings, but I think across the 6 months they didn't get any ROI, and maybe 1 or 2 actual meetings across the campaign. And I'll be honest, in my eyes, that is a campaign that's failed. But when we originally spoke to them, they said, okay, look, we have tried it before. We tried it for 6 months. It's not really proved any form of ROI or really any results in the way that we wanted it to. So I just can't really see us sort of trying it again. So we jumped on a call, and it's really important in situations like this that you don't just say, oh, it hasn't worked. Oh, well, that partner must have been bad. Try it again with us. We're really, really great. That's not how it works, right? Especially in any service across the board. You've almost got to act like a doctor or a consultant, and you've got to analyze the problem before trying to prescribe them the solution. So in any of these types of situations, the first thing we do is jump on a quick Teams call or Google Meets or whatever it is, and just talk through what actually went wrong with the campaign. Where did it fail? Were the callers not great? Was the data list not great? Where did the campaign actually break off? Rather than just trying to put a blanket term on just saying it was a bad campaign. So what we kind of realized after speaking with this woman for around 45 minutes was she'd had 2 callers on there, or 2 salespeople doing the cold calls, and they came from backgrounds that had no cold calling experience whatsoever. So they were quite like senior salespeople, so had quite an extensive background in terms of actual sales experience, but none of it was cold calling related. Like, it was all marketing related, like email campaigns or LinkedIn DMs, or just sort of like the I don't want to call them automated channels, but you're more so sending out email shots or sending out messaging online. And the truth is, a lot of that stuff, whilst great for generating leads, does not translate to actually picking up the phone and having a conversation. Um, Cold calling is just one of those things where, you could do any other form of like outreach and none of it really compares to cold calling. Like you could be the master at sending cold DMs on LinkedIn, and that would probably translate quite well to email campaigns or doing something similar within that space. Same thing with like Google Ads or video content or whatever it is. There's kind of like a few different avenues you can explore from those different paths. None of it really translates into cold calling. You either have done cold calling before or you haven't. And when we spoke to this woman, we kind of uncovered that the two people she'd put on the campaign had no experience whatsoever. So instantly, that was kind of red flag number one to me. If you're going into these sorts of campaigns, it's really important that you put someone on it that is, making a or has made a cold call before. Because you haven't, it's probably not going to end up too great. And the next thing that I asked her was, okay, so bearing in mind they haven't had a lot of sales experience before, what sort of guidelines did you give them with these scripts? Like what sort of qualifying questions were they asking? Were they following a framework? Were they, using different openers between them? Or how was sort of that part of the sales process running? And again, sort of red flag number two, is that she said that she kind of just left them to their own devices in terms of actually like creating the script and what it is they were saying. Which on the surface doesn't sound too bad. Like if you're going into running a cold calling campaign and you just say like, oh, well, let's leave it to the sales professionals. They probably know what they're doing best. Let's kind of leave them to it. You don't want to micromanage them, right? So you kind of just say, oh, well, they probably know best. Let's leave them to it. It doesn't work as well as you as you would kind of think. You need to give them some sort of like framework of what they actually need to be saying on these calls, because if you don't, what ends up happening is they either don't know what they're talking about, they're not following any kind of qualification process, and it's just going to lead to some pretty negative results across the campaign, which is kind of what happened in this case. So she ultimately kind of left them to their own devices in terms of the qualification process they're following, and surprise, surprise, both of them were following completely different qualification processes, and again, that's probably what affected the meeting rate, which was near zero across this campaign. So again, sort of like just another thing that you need to watch out for in terms of these campaigns. The third and final thing was that she not only was she getting these guys doing cold calling, but as well, I see this a lot online of people doing the multi-channel approach when it comes to outreach. So getting someone to do a quarter of their day doing LinkedIn DMs, another quarter of their day doing email outreach, another quarter of their day creating data lists, and another quarter of their day doing cold calling on the phones. Which is, I think she was getting them to do a similar approach here, or they might have just gone completely off the rails and started doing it themselves, to be honest. But again, this is another really popular thing that I see online, is people getting these SDRs to do this like hybrid role of doing like a little bit of both, and thinking to themselves like, oh, it's a way better way of doing things because you're doing LinkedIn outreach, you're doing email outreach, cold calling outreach, you're hitting them at all bases here, whereas I really have to disagree with that. The way I always see it, right, is if you have a fantastic cold caller, like someone that really, really excels in making cold calls, they know exactly what they're doing, they've mastered their tone of voice, the qualification process, the tone of voice, the speed in which they say their opener, like they've really honed their skills in terms of cold calling. You should get that person making cold calls all day. If you were to take that individual who excels in one aspect of outreach and then say, okay, you're going to spend half your day now writing DMs and email follow-ups, it's kind of just a waste of his talents. Do you know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't get Jordan Belford to be writing email copy all day and trying to write a personalized email, because it's a waste of his time. Same way as you wouldn't get someone that's brilliant at LinkedIn or LinkedIn DMs, like knows the exact formula to use, the place words, they're really good at personalizing it to the correct people, got really, really good copy in terms of writing this stuff. You wouldn't say to him, okay, you're now going to pick up the phone and try and translate into that, or translate that into phone skills, because they don't really, go over, or they don't really sort of what's the word I'm looking like? Translate over from different skills, right? Which is kind of why I think the hybrid approach is just a little bit outdated, and I think people just need to get rid of it. If you really want to go down that route, instead of hiring three people and getting them doing, a little bit of each, a little bit of LinkedIn, a little bit of email, a little bit of cold calling, and getting three people doing that, instead, hire one guy who's brilliant at cold calling and get him cold calling for the full day. Get another guy who's brilliant at LinkedIn DMs, get him writing LinkedIn DMs for the full day. Get another person who's brilliant at email campaigns and just get them doing email campaigns the entire day. You shouldn't be going to, a sales rep and saying, okay, you're going to do this hybrid approach, because all it does is it just waters down the effects and the results of all of your campaigns. And it's just, personally, I just think it's not the right way of doing things. But anyway, those are kind of the factors that went into this campaign and why it's maybe not worked as well as she'd hope. Now, on the flip side, I don't believe cold calling works for every single client out there. I feel like it only works with certain products that meets a certain criteria. I'll give you an example. We had a guy come to us a little while back, was really interested in running a cold calling campaign with us. And we said, yeah, sure, jump on a call, let's understand your product, let's understand your market, things like that. And he was basically selling like website domain names or something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something to do with like website domains or IT support or something along those lines. And we said, okay, what's your typical order value for one of these? And he said it was about £49 per sale that he was to make. And I said, okay. And is that, the clients typically come to you and just buy, one of these website domains at a time? Or like, how does that typically work? And he said, yeah, usually like just one domain at a time. And we kind of had to, break the news to him that, okay, if you want to run a cold calling campaign with us, it's just probably not going to work. You're essentially asking a cold caller to sit down on the phones all day and they have to make, a few hundred sales per month selling these website domains for you to actually see like a positive ROI on the campaign. And the thing is, the clients started arguing with us, like trying to tell us that no, a campaign would work for this, like it's a really, really, sellable product, which was strange. I've never had a client try and sell me on cold calling, right? Like I'm trying to turn him away, and he's trying to turn to us and say, no, like I really want to run a campaign, like I really think it's going to work. But also, like I see, this is another thing I see as well. I see a lot of posts online saying that cold calling is dead for high ticket items and it only works for low order value products because, decision makers in these higher up companies are just too high level. They're impossible to get in touch with. It's, too long of a sales cycle, whatever it is. And instead you need to go for, products that are less than £5,000 or below. And I'll be honest, I could not argue the opposite further. I think it's the exact opposite. I think cold calling doesn't work for products that are really low ticket items. Like anything less than £1,000 just isn't going to work. The 1,000 to 5,000 range is like okay, like it's not too bad. You can make campaigns work at that level. 5 to 10, you're looking pretty good. 10 to 50 is a great order value. 50 to like 500k or 5 million plus, I think is the ideal client when it comes to cold calling. I think it's the only channel with everything out there on the market, like email campaigns, LinkedIn DMs. I think signals is a big one that people are doing at the moment. But I think just in terms of every acquisition channel, even like Google ads and Facebook ads and all the sort of inbound channels, I don't think any of them are able to directly translate into, specifically reaching out to exactly who you want to, making sure that they don't go to your competitors, they hear you guys out first, and have a significant value there where one sale is going to bring so much ROI to your campaign that the campaign just becomes a no-brainer at that point. I feel like that's the only way cold calling does work. Because if you think about it, right, it ends up just becoming a numbers game. All you have to figure out is how many cold calls do you need to be making every single day to have a certain number of conversations per day, and have a certain number of those conversations convert into booked calls per day. That's kind of how these campaigns run, and we've also tested it in a sense that when we run these campaigns, you would think that, when you're selling something really low ticket, you're bound to just get way, way more booked calls than if you were to sell something, really high ticket, right? But you'd kind of be interested to learn that the numbers don't really differ too much, whether you're selling a low ticket item or a high ticket item, or even things like the close rates, which I know is crazy to say, but the numbers suggest the otherwise. And that's that high ticket items translate just as well into cold calls as a low ticket item. The only significant difference you're going to see is the order value, which is the light at the end of the tunnel, right? You don't want to spend 3 months, booking all of these calls, trying to close all these different deals to finally land 1 to 2 new clients, and your order value is like $2,000 average order, so you make $4,000 in those few months. You want it to be like 40 grand, right? 40 grand average order. So you still close those 2 clients, or even at a lower sense, you close 1 new client, but guess what? It's a 40k order value instead of a 4 grand order value. Do you know what I mean? Like you need to just be creating more higher ticket offers and just pitching them to companies that have more budget. I know I know I'm probably sounding like a broken instrument, but it's honestly the best way to go about these cold calling campaigns is just selling to people that actually have money. A lot of companies out there will spend all of their time trying to pull their resources into just like really low paying customers with a low ticket item. And the thing is, every other company out there is doing that exact same process. So you're all fighting over the same customers who already don't want to spend money in the first place. Whereas if you just created such a massively higher ticket offer, way more value. I mean, you know your company, right? You've probably got some really great case studies. You probably know what you're doing far better than most other agencies. So stop spending your time trying to go after these lower paying clients and these lower paying retainers. Instead, take your offer, 10x it, and just pitch it to a company that's got 100 times the budget. And like I said, the order or the book call rates and the sort of close rates on those deals really don't change as much as you would think they would. So look, the main takeaway I want you to get from this is to not just try cold calling once and declare it a dead channel, but instead, if you have tried cold calling before, or if you're still on the fence about it, just go back to whatever campaign you ran previously and first and foremost, analyze the problem. It's very, very rare that you run a campaign and it's simply got 100% chance of not working. There are always factors in there that you can change in terms of the data list, the caller, the script, your qualification process, the follow-up sequence that you're running for these campaigns. I mean, there's so many different tweaks that you can do to these campaigns that take it from a failing one to a winning one. So if you have tried cold calling before, don't just classify it as a dead channel. Don't listen to the LinkedIn gurus that are all over my LinkedIn page. I don't know if they're all on yours as well. But no, go through, analyze what actually went wrong with your campaign and just figure out, was there anything you could have done differently? And, if you're on the fence about trying cold calling, I think just give it a shot. Like, put together a really bespoke data list, a really bespoke offering that's got a really nice order value, and just go out there and find a competent sales professional that can sit and make cold calls for your business for the next 3 months. That's all you need to do. If you try it out with those 3 variables, a good caller, good data list, and a strong offering, you trial it for 3 months and you genuinely don't see any return on investment, then that's probably when it's time to pull the plug. But if you haven't actually gone through and made that assessment for yourself, I wouldn't write it off just yet. Don't listen to the AI buzz. And yeah, look, just give it a shot. Look, if you like the sort of content I'm posting at the moment, I'm doing these sort of podcast series weekly. So if you enjoy the content, you want to learn more about cold calling, you want to learn more about some of the processes that we follow at Everest to just boost your cold call campaigns' success, subscribe, stay tuned, and just look out for the next one.